Good evening. Welcome. We are so thrilled to be back in person for the first time in 2.5 years. So it's great to see such a good turnout. Who has it their first time at a North Carolina native plant meeting? Okay, wonderful. Well, that's what we were hoping for. We would have some, great. So this is going to be the perfect meeting to kind of give you an overview of what you can get out of being a part of our chapter and a part of the North Carolina Native Plant Society. We've got a great panel that's going to talk about kind of how they came to love native plant gardening and one of their favorite native plants. If you don't know anything about native plants, that's fine. You're going to get a good overview, and if there's always more to learn. So I'm excited about this presentation, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Lynda.
Okay, it's so wonderful to see everybody in person. I'm really happy to be here. And I have certainly enjoyed my 20 plus years involvement with North Carolina Native Plant Society. She asked us to tell you how we got involved in native plants. Well, I grew up in Greenville, South Carolina in the days before air conditioning. So on a Saturday or Sunday, the way we would beat the heat would be to drive to Hendersonville or Asheville. Now, I was interested in going to Asheville because it at that time had the Biltmore Dairy bar and we could get an ice cream up there. But my mother raved about all the plants that we would see going up that windy old road up to Hendersonville and Asheville. And that stuck with me. When I became an adult and I was interested in plants, I thought I had to really manage them, I guess you would say. And then it dawned on me, I ended up making friends with somebody who had a house on Grandmother Mountain and some different places in the mountains. And it dawned on me, nobody's doing anything. And these plants are all so wonderful. And that really was an epiphany for me to realize that I really, really wanted to be more involved in native plants. Now, when I retired at the summer of '99, I signed up for Master Gardeners and I took the course and stayed with them for 10 years. But at that time, there was no emphasis on native plants. And I was really disappointed. Now, the program was good. I met lots of people I wouldn't have met otherwise, and I learned a lot of material. So I'm not saying that it's not worthwhile. I'm just saying it didn't meet my needs, and what I wanted to learn about was native plants. So again, I got involved with Native Plant Society. I've been on the board. I was a secretary. I was a vice president. I was in charge of 5 years of spring and fall outings and lots of other things. And now I'm winding down. So I'm so happy that Sarah has agreed to lead our group. And I hope you all will work with her as the way everybody's worked with me. And I do thank you for that. So now I'm supposed to tell you about my native plants. I decided that I have so many favorite plants. But this time of year, this is one of my favorite plants because it blooms late. In fact, all the pictures I have here, the few I have, are all from other years because mine have just started blooming right now. Now, this Clinopodium georgianum has done well for me in a spot at the top of my driveway near Pine Woods, out in the blazing sun 100% of the time, no extra water. And when you dig in the soil to plant something up there, it just crumbles. There's no moisture in that soil up there. And that is why I love it. And that is why I wanted to tell you all about it, because you probably have a site where it's just so hot and so dry that you just don't know, what else would work. And this will really work. The bonus is that it's evergreen. All right, full sun, evergreen, short growing. They say up to 2 feet, but I don't think mine have gotten more than maybe 18 inches tall. It has a name change, but what else is new in the world of plants? All right, in 50 years, they have had changes in this name. It used to be in a different genus. I think they pronounce it Satureja. And then they decided it was a calamintha because it is a member of the mint family. It has a lovely fragrance. Okay. And then they finally decided it would be Clinopodium. So when I learned it was Clinopodium, georgianum, Georgia savory, Georgia basil, has several names in the common name too. Georgia savory, Georgia basil, Georgia calaman. All right, now it is no longer georgianum. It is carolinianum, and I didn't know that. I didn't know it had changed until I started looking up things to make sure I had some details for this plant to tell you about. So again, you can mark out georgianum and you can say carolinianum. Okay. All right, what else can I tell you about this plant? Well, as I say, there are 20 species of Clinopodium in the world. There are 11 in the USA and only 2 in North Carolina. This is one of the 2. The other one is called Clinopodium vulgare, and it is a very low growing, not much to look at, but it is evergreen. And I found it on my property after, you know, when you become a plant nerd, you go around and you walk and you look at everything down on the ground. So I finally realized what this was down in the field near the lake. And it does bloom, and it is a pink to white, which these are pink to white. But it's not anything you particularly would want to have in your garden if you are a garden person. Now, if you're a wild person like I am, you know, you'd like it. It's a nice ground cover, really. But back to the Clinopodium for your garden. Okay, I've already told you that it is fairly short. It's evergreen, full sun, good fragrance, but it's critically impaired. It's on the heritage list, critically impaired in North Carolina. It occurs only in the coast and in the Piedmont, but you can grow it here. Now, depending on what you read, Tony Avent has sold it. And I mean, he's got it. And I just was at Cullowhee this summer, and it was one of the plants of promise that somebody showed, you know, that this is a good plant to have. It can't take severe cold. And that is something that you need to be aware of. I am in Summerfield, and I am much colder out there. Like I say, some of my Swinish sunflower is not even starting to bloom yet. And, you know, in town, I've seen some of them. But anyway, mine have stayed good going to like 16 degrees at night, several nights in a row. So it's pretty hardy, but you can't count on it. Now, there are a couple of hybrids, and one is called Desi Arnaz. I said Arnaz, but it's Arnaz. And I got it from Dale Batchelor. I heard about it from Dale Batchelor over in Raleigh. And she, let's see, I think I've gone over my time. But anyway, she had got it from someone, what's his name? Growing Wild Nursery. And he has grown it. I don't know if he still has it or not, but it is evergreen, has a thinner leaf. And there's another amber blush, which is a hybrid with the red version of Clinopodium, which is a native one. All right, let's do the rest of the photos. It's the only woody mint native to North Carolina. The other thing all right, so they look pretty white. It has a rounded leaf, and there it is right there. Again, evergreen, and this little short thing. All right, there it is again. That's Amber Blush. The one, Amber Blush I lost just this winter. And it is the one that was the hybrid with the red version. And there you can see, now this is 2 years old, so it's fuller. They don't get tall, but they do, and they don't run, but they do get a bushier effect. So it's kind of like having a bunch of boxwoods for me up at the top of my driveway. And I really like that. There are some little, they do volunteer once they're established, and there's some volunteers I put in the plant sale.
Well, I was going to tell you a little bit of a story about my interest first, but if time is that short, I guess I better start with just the.
We tell too much about plants.
She asked about pictures of our garden. So you definitely would not want to see my garden now. Every year at this time of year, it is just, you know, I mean, it's so grown up. but this is early spring. And on the bottom right, the little bit of color you see is the Jacob's ladder there. So there are 2 varieties of Polemonium reptans in the southeast. This is the only one in North Carolina, and it's variety Reptans. So it's got Reptans in its name twice. The other one occurs in only Kentucky and Tennessee. So it is only gets, I call it a generalist plant. It grows in all kinds of conditions. It only gets a foot to a foot and a half tall, really. Has beautiful blue bell-shaped 5-petaled flowers. It blooms March and April, sometimes into May. It sets seed May, June, and even when it's setting seeds, it gets the calyx or the sepals. It's the part that's the underside of the flower, for those of you who don't know the botanic terms. Kind of make a little ball, and inside is the pod with 3 seeds in it, but it gets kind of a yellow-green. So even when the blooms are gone, it can be still a very interesting looking plant with those seeds on it. It's not evergreen, it's called a spring ephemeral, but unlike most ephemerals, at least for me anyway, most ephemerals come up before the trees have their leaves, they bloom, and then they go away, and they don't come out again until the next year. For me, my Jacob's ladder usually will stay up all year. It looks pretty ratty right now, but if it was really, really dry, it will possibly go totally dormant, but then it'll come up again in the fall and or the winter. It has an interesting sex life. It is sort of self-sterile. You have, and I don't know if you can see the flower on the right-hand side, has the stigma, which has like 3 little prongs on it. That's the female part of the flower. And the anthers are the little white, I don't know how you, what sort of a pill shape kind of a thing. And it's generally self-fertile. If the pollen should get from the male to the female part, and it should start to grow a pollen tube to fertilize, the plant will recognize that, hey, this is my stuff. We're not gonna make babies here. So that's one reason that it doesn't set seed when it's just a single plant. Another thing is that the female part is not, I think I'm getting this right, not receptive until the male has already done its thing. And the pollen is white. I don't know if you can see it in the picture on some of the petals. You'll also notice that in the one there where we can see, and there's one that's broken off, the female extends out beyond the male. So the pollen is heavy and it does not get to the stigma. Okay, there's the female, the stigma, there's the males, there's a bunch of males. And then this was a stigma too, but you can see the little 3 part there. And they extend out beyond the male part, so that usually if a flower is pollinated by bees or butterflies or things, the pollen is heavier. It's not wind carried. So it requires those bees to carry the pollen. So this plant is pollinated by bees and butterflies. And because it's an early bloomer, it's very good for the early bees to be able to get pollen and nectar. It has been used medicinally in times past, But I would not recommend anybody trying any of that because when I look online, it's got some contradictory things that it's used for. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If you're using it for this and you're also using it for something that's kind of the opposite, I don't think it would get anywhere for you. It grows, like I said, I consider it kind of a generalist. It will grow in sun, it will grow in shade. It grows best in part shade and kind of medium soil mesic environment. But if you have a wetland, it can grow in a wetland in the sun. And if it's drier, then it's going to need more shade. So, you know, it's really a versatile plant. I had one plant for many, many years, never got any babies. I wanted babies. And then when I got another one, I now have babies. But unlike some plants, I never have enough babies that I have to, I always can move them someplace else on my property or find people who want it. So it's easy to give away. And I brought 2 of them for the giveaway today. One of them has 2 small plants in it. So if you want babies, that might be a good one to choose. One of them is a single healthier looking plant. So you can pick and choose from that. It's called Jacob's Ladder because its foliage comes out and looks kind of like a ladder that you would climb. And I just found out today, I was looking up, trying to see if there was anything I missed. Some of us know the name Bill Kalina, and he discovered a cultivar in a batch of seedlings. Well, it was a selection and it's now been cultivated. So it's now a cultivar, which has variegated foliage, sort of white, pink, and green. I think it's called Stairway to Heaven or something like that. So there are other cultivars that have different colored flowers, pinker or purpler or whiter, or whatever. There's also one in the trade. If you want to go native, there's one from Europe that's readily available in the trade here. Ceruleum or Cerulia. It's a blue, pretty intense blue. And it's not a native. So if you want to go native and you go to the nursery and you see that, that's not the one you want. You might get some of the other cultivars that are of this species, but stay away from that one if you're trying to go native. In Larry Melichamp's book, he rates this a 4 and the top rating is a 4. And he talks about he's had one in his garden for 30 years and every year it expands a little bit. Now, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about this name. Polemonium, apparently, there's different versions. It was either named after Polemon the first, who was a king in what's now part of Turkey, his son, or there was a Greek philosopher also called Polemon. But Reptans means creeping. And I don't know how many of you know ajuga plants, non-native, or mesus. Well, they're Reptans and they creep. I have never known anybody who has had Jacob's Ladder creep. Okay, the bees go after the pollen and the nectar. The butterflies go after it, but they're only interested in the nectar. And I could find nothing about specialist bees that actually require this plant. So I think it's just used by generalists of all kinds of bees.
Okay, I'm David Kraft. I grew up in Greensboro. Followed my dad around when I was a kid. He was kind of interested in cultivars and kind of odd things from all over the world. His mom was from Mississippi, and so he had an affinity for bringing things from that part of the country and trying to get them to grow here. He tried to get Spanish moss to grow in Greensboro more times than I care to remember. And I got chiggers sitting in the back of the car a couple times coming back from the beach. How many of you have hiked the Palmetto Trail? Okay, there are no palmettos on the Palmetto Trail. That's one of his, I don't know, he and Mike Simpson, the trails guy, he would throw windmill palm seeds out. And so that's the plant that you see. It's a windmill palm. They're all over that trail. They're in Country Park. They're at St. Pius Church, Acock, Swan Middle School, and places that, you know, that we showed up. You know, I started my own yard stuff about 35 years ago, but I grew up in a natural yard. I never had to mow the yard. I mowed other people's yards because I got $5 and I like that. But I got into the fescue and azalea thing and the battle to have pretty grass and nice looking azaleas, which look great for about 2 weeks. And then you wonder, you know, okay, what's going on the rest of the year? So slowly I kind of gave up on that and cultivars because you know, they're just too finicky. I've been out in the woods a lot, started going out in the woods with people who are a lot smarter than I am about what's out in the woods. And I'd be walking around looking and they'd go, well, you know, you're about to step on that. And I'd look down, it'd be this little teeny bloom. But if you get right down there, it was something that was really, really pretty. And if it's called Pipsissewa, you know, that as a Boy Scout, that you can make that wintergreen tea, you know, that was even a bigger bonus, and sassafras root and all that kind of stuff. So and then about 5 years ago, I bought this property down in the Uwaris, and long story, a whole nother meeting. But I like people to come down there because I've had people who come who are smarter than I and who point out a lot of things. And I've been doing a lot of things, been putting some fire on the property, walking along back in May, and I saw something and I thought it was a part of a balloon because I get the birthday balloons that just walking in the woods, and there's one. I walk over, it's a yellow lady slipper. It was only one. So I'm going to try to put a little fire around that spot until I can get to the point and maybe get the Forest Service to burn a larger block, but it takes a couple of years to get to that point. We moved 2 years ago, and this is next to our driveway. And my son-in-law gave me the, let's see, Agastache. Is that right? Agastache. And there's the one I have is really comes as far east as Kentucky. There's an eastern one, the foeniculum. Does that sound about right? Okay. All right. See, I took Latin in middle school, but it didn't sink in. And and then there's nepatoides. That sound about right? All right, that's the yellow giant, which I don't have, but that's the more native one. Does anyone have an experience with that one? It blooms yellow. The foeniculum blooms more of the purple. But I've just been fascinated by this one. I'd like to get one of the more local varieties because it blooms and it blooms and it blooms and it blooms. And the carpenter bees and the bumblebees and the little skippers and moths and everything are on it for weeks and months. I mean, it started blooming in early June and it's still going. Forgive the creeping Jenny in the bottom. Sometimes you got to have a little accent. So that's a little better picture of it. I've got Joe Pye weed behind it, which did real well, but it's kind of already faded out. And they're up on a fence. So, and there's some goldenrod back in there. So it's kind of all coming together. Forgive me, there's some daylilies back behind there, but you know. So this is a bulletproof plant. It just, you know, doesn't like wet feet, but you know, lots of things, most things don't like wet feet generally. You know, you can cut it back, it reseeds. I've already got another one that's come up. So, you know, it'll get around, but it's easy just to pull it up or pot it up and give it to somebody else.
It is wonderful to be here and see all of these faces. This is just great. I fell in love with native plants because of my loving a certain butterfly. And so my native journey sort of started 10, 15 years ago as I read about the plight of the monarch. And I thought we need to get some native plants and some milkweeds and so forth. And then it sort of went on a roll, and we decided that we had to just really sort of focus on the native plants. It just was our passion. I grew up on a tobacco farm, so I grew up with lots of native plants around me. We weren't focused on that because we were working with the cotton and the tobacco and the corn, but it was just always there. So we lived with a lot of beautiful native things that I wish I remembered all of them. I picked something that I didn't know about when I was growing up. I don't think I remember seeing any of these around me as my favorite native plant. And I have a lot of reasons that made me feel that I just had to choose this plant. Mountain mints are a nearly unmatched food source for a wide variety of insects. Bees, butterflies, pollinators of every kind are drawn to them from the time they start blooming, and they bloom a long time. Most of the different mountain mints, and we have several native mountain mints to North Carolina. They are all in the Laminaceae family, and they all have square stems, which for me, and I don't have a background in botany, so I did study Latin though, so that helped me with the names. But it's just good to know certain things, that if it's a square stem and you think it might be mountain mint and it smells that way, it probably is some mountain mint. I just think that they capture the hearts of gardeners who love the smell, the fragrance, and how wonderfully exciting they are to the pollinators. My personal favorite, and you have to know how hard it is to choose a personal favorite when you have so many, but I decided this year that my very, very favorite mountain mint, and I'm going to show you, Pycnanthemum incanum is my favorite. It is absolutely beautiful. And depending on what day I have fallen in love with some other plant, I might be whispering how much they are my favorite. But overall, this is my very favorite plant. And it's called Hoary Mountain Mint. And it just is absolutely wonderful. I've seen it Silverleaf Mountain Mint and probably some other names, but it is Pycnanthemum incanum. It's erect, many branched, and it grows to about 3 feet high unless it's in a really rich habitat, in which case it can be a little taller. Long blooming. It has upper leaves that take on a kind of frosted look, and that's the word hoary that represents that kind of silvery color. So that's how it became Hoary Mountain Mint. Its foliage has a distinct, and to me, just kind of intoxicating fragrance. I love to press the leaves, and you can press the leaves of this if it comes near you. I just think it smells fabulous. And the pollinators think it smells pretty fabulous too, because they come to it. We have had lots of bees, especially butterflies sometimes, little tiny ones like it, and others go there. But the bees were all over it for about 2 months. We could barely see the flowers. It's also makes a delicious tea. I nibble the leaves when I walk through the garden of several of my plants that I know are edible, and this is very edible. It also, and I didn't know this until I did some studying, it supports conservation biological control. And it does this by attracting predatory or parasitoid insects that prey on pest insects. It's kind of like a natural insecticide that you have attracted to this plant. And so it does many things in addition to pollination. It actually helps to get rid of those nasty pests that are attracted by or that are eaten by the other things that it attracts. You can sort of see from my picture, there's an eastern tiger swallowtail on the mountain mint. You probably can't see all the bees, but any one of these pictures will have a lot of bees. It's so fantastic because it has those beautiful clustered flowers. They are lavender, they're sort of white to lavender, and you can see the touch of lavender on the edge. And there's some purple spots around so that you can identify it. Next month, you will have someone who really knows a lot about pycnanthemums, and they can tell you some of the identification. I've gone back and forth on this, whether it was Incanum or Muticum, depending on what nursery I bought it in. So I have fairly firmly determined that this particular one is the Incanum. But I may find out different next month. It certainly does delight the pollinators and humans as well. It has lots of seeds, and if you have a chance to look at the one that's passed around, you will see where some of those flowers, you can already see the seeds developing. If you leave your seed heads on of all of your plants during the winter, they are often a very necessary food for the birds that don't have access to insects. I think that insects probably go under the ground to get away from the cold air at the top. And so if you have seed heads there, you can tidy it up in March. We leave them until we feel like nobody's eating anything out of those seed heads. It just breaks my heart to cut it back so that the new growth can come in. Now you're wondering, now I know it's beautiful, it smells great, pollinators love it. Why did I choose this plant as my favorite one? Well, I am very practical. And I found out some things about this that I'd like to share, because you too are probably going to discover this is going to be your favorite plant too, after I tell you these things that I discovered. Or actually, they were always there. I just came to realize how special they were. They are not only beautiful, edible pollinator plants, they have some qualities that I, who live in the country in Randolph County with clay soil and a well that was not dug very deep, and I don't overwater. We water everything the first year. And then after that, it's on a need to water basis. And we're trying to get something that is one of the first qualities that I love about Pycnanthemum Incanum. It is very drought tolerant. When other things are drooping during a 2-week period of no rain and it's 90 degrees, I don't know, this plant's just like, yay, it's so happy, it just doesn't care. It also is not that picky about its soil. I really like that, because I did talk about the clay. Well, we have clay, and then in the back, we're kind of moist, and we have this and that. I think, and this grows all over our yard. So not only in the front where it's very dry, but in the back, it doesn't matter. It's happy with moist, it's happy with dry. It's just happy to be there. But the other thing that is the absolute favorite part, and you might start to feel this your way yourself, it is deer resistant. And if you've ever had all of your beautiful Rudbeckias, black-eyed Susans, goldenrods, all of these gorgeous things just mowed down by deer wandering through your property because, oh look, banquet. They do not eat the mint. They don't eat any of the mints. They don't like the fragrance. It messes up their sensory sense of how they're going to protect themselves from predators, little realizing, poor things that they are, that their only predators are the cars and a few hunters during deer season. But the predators have all been killed off. So we still are happy that they have that particular protection. So mountain mints would be a good plant. Other fragrant plants would be bergamots and bee balm and things that have fragrance. And you can research fragrance. And I think if you find a nice list of things that maybe have enough fragrance to keep the deer at bay, you will be able to succeed if you have a lot of deer pressure. But that's the secret behind my choosing this one over all my other favorites. Well, this is actually obviously not the mountain mint, but you wanted garden pictures. So these are our beautiful summer phlox, and probably Joe Pye and summer phlox and probably some black-eyed Susans. We just have a sort of banquet of plants. It's a little wild in our garden, not as wild as Lynda's, because I love Lynda's yard. And this is one that has this was my pretty picture to put in to show Coreopsis and Echinacea, which are fabulous plants. And on a given day, every one of these plants is my favorite. But right now, when I'm talking to you about what is practical, Pycnanthemum is the one. Pycnanthemum and Canum because it's so beautiful.
Hi, I'm Kelly Gage. I live in Southwest Guilford County, and I grew up on a tobacco farm just like she did. And we moved about 8 years ago to some property owned by a large family. They own all the property around us, and it was pretty much wooded. We have a very small little pasture. We do have a spring-fed stream on it, and it was sort of a mess. It had not been managed in 100 years. We built our house, and so we sited it in a pine, scrub pine grove, basically, and then we worked around that. And so far to date, and I'm not counting trees because I'm not very good about writing down my trees. I keep a database of everything because I can't remember anything anymore. And I have found 37 indigenous, what I would say were herbaceous plants. There might be 1 or 2 trees in there. On the property, once we started clearing out all of the invasives, which included, Chinese privet. We have a viburnum that we've been clearing out for the last 5 or 6 weeks. Those just taken over. And in fact, I'm like covered in poison oak right now. My husband, he is an unwilling captive in my gardening, but he will bail me out when I, get in over my head with some of this stuff. And, I sometimes get my son to help me out a little bit too. Some of my favorite plants, and because we have the stream, we have this great microclimate, are the ephemerals. I really love the ephemerals, and one of the main reasons I love the ephemerals is because they do die back and you don't have to clean them up. I mean, they're just gone. So I love the delicate nature of most of them. But when I was trying to pick something today, I decided you needed, people like pollinator plants, and they like things that are easy to take care of, and ironweed fits the bill. Ironweed meets all of those criteria. There are 25 native species of ironweed. And I did purchase mine. I have 3 of them. I purchased it from a botanic garden sale, which is not too far from here. And I won't say where because of what I'm about to tell you. I really thought that I had Vemonia lettermanii, okay, which is the thread leaf Vemonia, and it looks very much like Amsonia hubrichtii. And I do have 2 of those. And then I found out one of them had been mislabeled. So just to reiterate what Lynda said, you really have to check your labels and look at things when you're buying some of these plants. It just happens that this is a native, they're both native species, but you just don't know what you're getting sometimes. They can be mislabeled. So this one, it is noveboracensis, and it is also called the New York ironweed. It has a ridged stem, which makes it sort of unique in some, there are several that have it, but not all of them have a ridged stem. So it's got little ridges running up and down the stem, and that's a good way to be able to identify it. It grows in zones 4 to 9. It grows anywhere from the Midwest all the way to, ironweeds in general, from the Midwest all the way to the East Coast and up and down the Atlantic. They do like full sun, and they're very drought tolerant. They will take average soil. Where I have it, I actually have a little bit of clay. Most of our soil is a nice loam, but this was where some of those pine scrubs were, and it has adapted very well. And just like Pat, I water 1 year. That's it. If you don't live, you're out. I've got too much to take care of. So it got, the first year it was watered, possibly. We have, again, a microclimate. We've had about 5 weeks of drought up until this past week. We got 1 3/4 in the last couple of days, but I have not done anything to it, and it's performed very well. It bloomed. You can see that it is a really good pollinator plant. I have taken all these pictures within about 10 minutes of each other. So this is not even over a long period of time. It hosts the American lady caterpillar. And I have seen see if I can find them. Okay, this is just where I happen to have it, which is next to a gazebo. This plant in particular, the New York Ironweed, it's over my head. So I'm 5'6", and it's really close to 6 feet tall. The one that I thought I was buying is only about 2 feet tall. So there's quite a range. Yeah, it's right on the border, you know. So you walk by and there's this giant plant. And I really took that picture so you could see how tall it was up against the gazebo. It's, you know, maybe about 3 feet wide overall. They make nice clumps. I've had it in here for 2 years. This year I have it in my notes to dig it up and move it. But you know, it stays upright. The name Ironweed comes from the fact that it has really strong stems. So I had a conversation with someone from the native group one day about the Rudbeckia Henry Eilers, and beautiful, love it. Mine's over 6 feet tall until the first rain hits it, and then it's 1.5 feet tall. And so one of the things you can do with these larger Veronias, you can cut them back early. I wouldn't recommend doing it much past June, but you can cut them back, and you know, you'll get maybe a little less bloom, but they are profuse with blooms to start with. So I really don't think you're hurting anything, and then you can control your height a little bit better. Deer, I have had deer run rampant through my yard this year, and they don't bother it at all. It does have a serrated leaf, and some of the varieties are more serrated than others. That's probably why they don't bother with it. This one, you can barely see the serration. You have to run your finger on it to even feel it. So it can be subtle. It just depends on which variety you have. Let's see, the blooms last about a month. So you got a good full 4 weeks of blooms, up to 6 weeks with a few of the varieties, but that's average. And they're usually late July to August. This particular variety was solid through August for me. And it's just about finished. I did not bring the plant because it's not quite done. It does set these nice little seed heads which have little fuzzes on them, and they really aren't even dried out. The rain, you know, although we needed the rain, that has not helped the process right now. I do have seeds back there. There are 20 packets of seeds. Just please take one, you know, if you would like to have some. There's plenty of seeds in there you can take with you. If you're going to seed it, it does like a cold weather period. So you either have to stratify it, you know, in your refrigerator, or you need to go ahead and get it out before your cold weather, because it does require cold in order to germinate. And it does require soil coverage. So you can't just sprinkle it on the ground. You need to put it under a little bit of dirt in order to get it to germinate. I haven't found it to be particularly like self-seeding. So I like that about it. You know, that's just, I have so much, you know, going on that I don't, you know, need it to seed, I don't think. Birds love the seeds though. They will eat your seeds. So that's another thing. You don't have to really worry about deadheading it. You are going to need a good set of clippers though to get it down. Those stems they're pretty thick on this, you know. I mean, it's not like bamboo or anything, but they're a good sturdy stem, and they will stand up to some of the worst storms. I've only had one stem fall over into the outside of the clump, and you know, we've had some thunderstorms come through, so I've been pretty pleased with that. Let's see. Okay, so some of the pollinators that you might see on it, again, these were all taken with about 10 minutes, and it was just full. The bees, I can't even, and the insects, I can't even identify all of them, but the black swallowtail was all over it. This is a silverback skipper. They were on it a lot. And let me see if there's anything else I want to tell you about it. It is perennial. I think that's the only thing I left out. The cluster blooms, so it's a single stem and then it branches out into what is called a cluster bloom. And within that cluster bloom, there's little individual stems that you'll see with multiple flowers on them. Those can range in size from 3 to 16 inches, depending on the variety. So you get really a big bang for your buck when you are looking at this plant. And I told Sarah to leave this one for last. I said, this is a money shot because the monarchs love it. I've had a lot of monarchs on it during this bloom period. So, everybody wants to encourage the monarchs to stop in their yard. And this is a really good plant to do that. So lots of good pollinators.
I'm going to try to be really brief because I think we've run a little bit over tonight, but I wanted to just share not so much about the plant, but maybe a little bit more about my story of how I got involved in native plants. So I grew up in Kernersville at the end of a dirt road, not really appreciating what was really around me. I think, when you grow up around nature and wildness, and it just is what it is, until I began to see it taken away. And there's so much development going on in North Carolina right now that it just breaks my heart, all the clear cutting and the developments, and one shopping center after another, one apartment complex, one more housing development. So I think that was kind of brewing in the back of my mind. We live in Greensboro now. I still have the property where I grew up in Kernersville, and I'm working on that property as well. But we wanted to do some landscaping. My son wanted more flowers and more color in the yard. I love green and texture. Was really not sure what to do, and I was not native plant savvy yet. So I was trying to figure it out. I happened to find out about this guy named Doug Tallamy, thankfully, before I did anything. So I heard him speak, started reading his books, started going to, COVID began to happen. That was kind of brewing, coming along. There was a lot of things happening all at once. But I was going to all of these meetings, trying to learn as much as I could learn, whether it was Audubon, whether it was North Carolina Wildlife Federation, whether it was the North Carolina Native Plant Society. I remember the first meeting I walked into, and I sat right over here, kind of in the same spot that I'm in right now. And I was so nervous. I didn't know anybody, didn't know the first thing about what everybody was talking about. But I loved hearing people speak so passionately about these plants. And I found it really satisfying to learn something new. It was challenging for my brain, and it was like a puzzle that I wanted to work. And I needed to do this. It was something I felt really strongly about. So the first thing was removing invasives. We pulled a dump truck load and a half out of my yard here in Sunset Hills in Greensboro. And then I was like, well, where do I find the plants? That was the whole thing. If I didn't know where to buy them. There's such wonderful resources within the local growers that are growing these plants. And it might be a bit of a road trip, but I love a good road trip. So I'll drive to Chapel Hill in a skinny minute and go get some lunch and pick up some plants and come back. And it's just been a lot of fun. But what I found out was that gardening for wildlife and gardening for nature and trying to restore ecosystems justifies the money and the time and the resources that I put into this. It's not a hobby. It's something that I just have to do. I feel very committed, and I feel like it's so worthwhile. And I'm so thrilled to see so many people here tonight who are supporting this as well. All of the native plant sales are so well attended, and people are just really clamoring to learn more and do more. So I began to do this work at home, and then I started working on my property in Kernersville. And then I thought, well, why not do it at Maxie B's? So we had some raised beds built, and we pulled out the non-native plants from there. We started planting natives there, and we have this certified wildlife habitat right in the middle of the parking lot. And we have about how many, Heather Russell was over today photographing, we have monarch caterpillars on our swamp milkweed that just arrived. We have like about 30. So that was the news of the morning at the bakery. It wasn't, what are we baking today? It's, we have monarch caterpillars on our swamp milkweed. So it's a big thing. I really enjoy learning, sharing, growing. It's just a lot of fun. So my plant today is one of the first native plants that I bought, not the first, but one of the first. I got lucky because it's really easy. It's also in the mint family. It's Scutellaria and Canna, downy skullcap. And I planted it, just put it in the ground and see what it would do. My yard is a little bit of a specimen. I've got one plant of this and one of this and one of that because I didn't know what any of them were, just to see what happens. Where do they like it? Do I like it? Will I buy more? But this one's great. It blooms a really long time. It is not fussy. Doesn't seem to need a lot of water. It'll take shade. It'll go in the sun. I've had some tree cover change in the area that it's been planted. I've had it for about 3.5 years now, and it's done just fine. It adapts to whatever it's given. It's about 4 feet tall. It's a clumper. It spreads a little bit, but not a lot. I haven't had trouble with it really spreading too much. I think it's really beautiful. This looks a little more blue to me. I feel like mine's a little more in the lavender family. Maybe the soil influences the color of the bloom. But it does, you can propagate it via seed. Has to have the cold winter. So the seed swap that the Native Plant Society does in December is great. And it's been my tradition to try to sow on the winter solstice. And then just put those plants outside and let the winter sowing take care of it and see what happens the next spring. So I brought some plants tonight that I'm really proud of because last year I killed all the plants that I tried to grow from the seed swap. And I confessed at the next seed swap that I had killed all of my plants. But this year I had plants growing all over my patio that I grew from seed. So I'm super excited. I brought some tonight. This plant, it does really kind of hold its own in the garden. Larry Mellichamp gives it 3 stars, so not 4, but he gives it 3. There are several different varieties. I only have this one. But more importantly, I guess Doug Tallamy tells us the connection of native plants to insects. And we also know from him that insects are specialists. So if skullcaps disappear, so does the, and I'm not a very good entomologist, so Chrysalimid beetle genus. So in each, there are multiple skullcaps, but each beetle only eats one type of skullcap. So if you lose any one of these varieties, you lose that beetle. And as E.O. Wilson tells us, the little things are what run the world. We need all of the beetles. We need all of the plants to feed all of the insects. So every form is important. I should probably get more of them. It also attracts bees, songbirds, moths. It tolerates heat and drought, dry soil, and it doesn't really have any serious problems of disease or pests. So it's just been super, super easy, and it's beautiful, and it serves a purpose in this world.